Wanted to keep dancing competitively, found a new partner, but my boyfriend thinks I'm cheating and demands I quit. I'm a collegiate ballroom dancer and have been competing for 7 years now, ever since I quit ballet. Dance is a massive part of my life, I'm talking at least 10 hours a week, and I don't plan on giving it up anytime soon. I met my boyfriend during our senior year in college, although we'd been friends for a while prior. We share most values and goals, and for the most part, we're good at finding middle ground and resolving disagreements. Except, there's just this one huge issue. When we first started dating, I was already on my college's ballroom dance team, partnered with a guy as is, well, traditional in ballroom. My boyfriend wasn't thrilled about it from the start. He voiced his discomfort several times. It bothered him that I'd spend so much time in close contact with another man, even though my relationship with my partner was strictly platonic. I reassured him, explained how the team had rules against romantic relationships between partners, and eventually he said he'd accept it even though he didn't like it. The thing is, it always felt unresolved, more like he was tolerating it rather than making peace with it. But then, my dance partner graduated a semester ahead of me, and due to a shortage of male leads, I started dancing the guy's part with another girl so she could compete. Truthfully, I didn't enjoy leading, but it let me stay involved until graduation. During that time, it was a relief. My boyfriend didn't mention anything about being uncomfortable, and our relationship went smoothly. Fast forward, after college, both my boyfriend and I managed to land jobs in a big city with this amazing, thriving ballroom community. I couldn't wait to get back into dancing as a follower, so I started hunting for a new partner. Let me tell you, it's not easy finding someone the right height, comparable skill level, and with similar dance ambitions. It took a while, but eventually, I found a great partner. I was excited to tell my boyfriend, but instead of sharing my enthusiasm, he exploded. He'd apparently assumed I'd just quit ballroom after college, like lots of my teammates had, especially since finding a partner hadn't gone smoothly for a while. He accused me of wanting to cheat on him, despite my new dance partner being engaged. He insisted I should find another girl to dance with, even though women willing to dance the leader part are practically non-existent, and I really don't like leading anyway. After a heated argument, I managed to convince him to give ballroom a try. I hoped that if he experienced the dance partnership dynamic for himself, he'd understand, and maybe we could have some fun dancing socially too. To my surprise, he really enjoyed it. We went to a few social dances together, and I thought maybe this was a breakthrough. But just a couple days ago, after his dance teacher suggested he was ready for a competition, he brought up wanting to compete. I was all for it initially, until he let it slip that he wanted me to be his partner for the competition. I had to explain to him, gently, but honestly, that we're at completely different competition levels. He's been dancing for a few months, while I've invested years into this. I'd already made plans to compete with my partner, and I just couldn't step away from that, especially since I'd already taken a semester off from serious competition when my college partner graduated. He was furious, accusing me of tricking him and saying it was unfair that I wasn't willing to compete with him after he learned to dance for me. Honestly, it stung. He seemed to think it was no big deal for someone with a few months' experience to immediately jump to my level in competition, and it felt insulting. I care deeply about both my relationship and my dancing, but dance is such a fundamental part of who I am. In the future, if he keeps dancing and his skills grow, maybe we could compete together. But now isn't the right time. Right now, I'm at this crossroads. Should I break it off? Or am I the one being unfair? I really don't know. Update 1. A couple of months ago, I was tangled up in a tough situation with my boyfriend who absolutely hated the fact that I competed in ballroom dance with a male partner, someone who wasn't him. I decided it was finally time to sit down and really talk to him. We had a long, deep conversation about why the whole dancing thing made him so uncomfortable. We talked through his feelings, and I tried to find some common ground. I apologized for not being clear that my dancing with my partner was a competitive thing and not just a bit of social fun. As a possible compromise, I suggested we try out a mixed proficiency competition together. I made sure to explain that I wanted to dance with him competitively, but this would be in addition to still competing with my regular partner, at least until my boyfriend reached my level, a process that would probably take years. He was definitely upset at first, but then he agreed as long as he could meet my dance partner and get to know him better. The conversation didn't solve everything, but it felt promising enough for me to give him one last shot. To follow through, I talked to my dance partner about setting up a double date, just casual, at a coffee shop, with his fiancée so everyone could get comfortable. While we all talked, my partner's fiancée shared how she had gotten used to her fiancé dancing with other women by coming to watch practice a few times. This was when my partner was dancing with someone else. My boyfriend thought this was a great idea and asked if he could start dropping me off at practice on weekends to watch. I agreed, with the clear rule that he needed to work with my schedule and couldn't interfere during practice. Things seemed okay, until the third weekend of this arrangement. That Saturday, he was completely hungover and still in bed at 9:30 a.m. when I needed to go to practice. I'd reminded him the night before, and even woke him up at 9 a.m. to tell him again, but he just refused to get up. So I left for practice on my own. When I got back around 1:30 p.m. for lunch, he was furious. He accused me of sneaking around behind his back with my dance partner, even though I'd told him, repeatedly, exactly where I was going and what I was doing. He even brought up how I held the door open for my partner during our double date and how we smiled too much during practice. I just snapped. I was so exhausted from constantly feeling like I was wrong for doing something I loved. I broke up with him right there. Later that evening, my, now ex-boyfriend started blowing up my phone, insisting he didn't believe I was serious and that I was being unfair. He demanded that I come back because I'd promised to compete with him. I told him that I would still hold up my word and dance with him at the one competition I mentioned before, nothing more, nothing less. This made him even angrier, and he lashed out, saying that ballroom dancing was stupid, calling me a cheating whore for picking dancing over him, and telling me I'd never find another guy like him. Honestly, I hope I don't. Breaking the lease and moving out was expensive and exhausting, but the relief I feel is indescribable. It's a little lonely living by myself sometimes, but having the freedom to live and dance on my own terms is absolutely worth it. I hope one day I'll find someone who supports my dancing, but for now, I'm just enjoying the peace. Only time will tell what comes next. Update 2. The one competition I promised him came up sooner than I expected. We kept it as structured as possible, only studio rehearsals with his teacher present, no date nights disguised as practice, no texting outside of scheduling. He swung between sugary apologies and bristling at corrections, and every time his teacher told him to tone down his frame or to stop clamping my shoulder, he'd glance at me like I'd betrayed him by not defending his ego. I focused on technique, counted the music out loud, and reminded myself that this was the last time I'd ever be in hold with him. Competition day was chaos in the way comps always are: hairspray fog, someone crying over a broken heel, volunteers sliding numbers across sweaty backs. I got there on time. He didn't. He rolled in 15 minutes before our first heat, smelling faintly of last night, insisting he'd warm up on the floor. His shirt wasn't pressed. He couldn't find his number clip. He wanted me to switch out of my dress because he thought the color made me look older. I took my number from the deck captain, pinned it on him with the extra safety pins I keep in my bag, and told myself to get through 3 dances and walk away. It lasted exactly 1 dance and half a long wall. He tried to throw a little lift he'd seen on YouTube into a bronze heat, something we'd never practiced and something that would get us disqualified even if it went well. He whispered "trust me" and tightened his grip, and I felt that old sting of ballet instinct, the split second where your body knows the math on a fall. I said no, out loud. He hissed my name. I peeled his hand off my back, stepped out of hold mid-phrase, and walked to the edge. I caught the deck captain's eye and told him I was scratching the remainder of our heats for safety. The judges watched him flounder alone for a beat, and then the music rolled right over him. Backstage he exploded. The mask dropped hard. He called me dramatic, accused me of trying to humiliate him because I couldn't stand seeing him step into my world. He jabbed a finger at my shoulder where his thumbprint was already blooming red. A volunteer from registration stepped between us so calmly it almost felt choreographed and asked him to lower his voice. He didn't. Security was there in under a minute. They didn't make a scene, they just walked with him until he was out of the ballroom. He tried to turn in the hallway to say one last thing, and the security guy pointed at his badge and said, "If you come back in here, you're done for the weekend." It was as simple as a cut to black. I found a quiet corner and shook. My partner's fiancé pressed a cold bottle of water into my hand before I even realized I was thirsty. I texted the organizer to formally scratch the rest of my mixed pro heats and then sat on the floor in my dress, cross-legged like a kid, and breathed until my heart rate stopped roaring in my ears. My actual events were late afternoon. I taped over the bruise, took my hair down and back up to reset my head, and danced. I don't even know that we were perfect. What I remember is being in hold with someone who felt like a conversation again instead of an argument. We placed second in a stacked final, and standing on that podium felt like rinsing something off. My partner squeezed my hand as they read our number and didn't say anything, and somehow that kindness landed harder than any speech. I thought that would be the end of it, but ballroom is a small world and apparently he tried to send a complaint to the organizer claiming I'd sabotaged him. The organizer forwarded it to me with a 2-line note: "We were informed of the issue during the heat. We support your decision." His teacher texted, too, not to ask me to reconsider anything, but to apologize for not catching his escalation sooner and to let me know the studio refunded his package and asked him not to return. The best part of the day didn't even belong to me. An hour after our final, the college coordinator found me near the warm-up floor and asked if I could help. A freshman had just been abandoned by her lead, nerves, he'd bailed, and she'd been training for her first mixed proficiency all semester. I told her to give me 5 minutes. We pinned on a spare number, I slipped into my low heels, and I led. She shook like a tuning fork through the first dance, then suddenly she smiled so wide I could feel it without looking at her face. We didn't do anything fancy. We placed 4th. She cried into my shoulder and said, "Thank you," like I'd moved a mountain. Walking off the floor with her and her college friends cracking jokes felt like stepping back into the community that raised me. I blocked his number the same night. The next morning, the bruise on my shoulder had darkened, and I took a photo mostly so I wouldn't be tempted to tell myself later that I'd exaggerated. Then I went to Sunday practice with my partner, ran rounds, and filled out paperwork to teach the beginner series at our studio on Tuesday nights. I've been terrified of teaching, but it felt right to turn all of this into something that isn't just surviving. I don't know what my love life will look like. I do know the sound the floor makes under a room of people who love the same ridiculous thing you do, and I'm not giving that up. The next comp is in 6 weeks. I'm working on a new routine for my solo, no lifts. Only things we've trained, only things I can own. I am, finally, dancing the part that belongs to me. Update 3. 6 weeks is a strange amount of time. It's long enough for the smell of E6000 glue to work its way out of your practice dress, but not long enough for your ribcage to forget it's been braced. The first Tuesday I walked into the studio with a dry erase marker clacking in my bag and a lesson plan falling apart in my head. The beginner class was already a little hurt at the door, 2 co-workers in matching polos, an art teacher with glitter still in her hair, a guy in steel-toe boots who kept apologizing for being late when he wasn't. We put name tags on, tied a shoelace that wasn't mine, and I said slow, quick like I was telling myself to breathe. Teaching did something that competing hadn't in a long time. Everyone's first box step looks like trying to carry a Christmas tree through a doorway. One woman kept laughing so hard she'd forget her weight transfer and stomp on my toes, then apologize, then stomp again. A man with hands like baseball mitts held me like I was made of glass until I said, "You won't break me," and then he steadied the way a table steadies when you find its 4th leg. When someone got it, really got it, you could see it climb their body like a light turning on from the feet up. I came home with a sore voice and a full head, slept without waking to check the lock. 2 days before my comp, the organizer emailed me a heat list with a short line at the bottom. We flagged an individual per our last event. We will keep on deck areas separated. Please check in with me on arrival. Seeing his name in that spreadsheet felt like swallowing ice. I told my partner, told the owner of my studio, told myself I wasn't going to let a row of cells in a PDF rewrite my weekend. The morning of the comp, the ballroom smelled like coffee and spray tan and brass polish. The Marley had that high gloss look that makes everything seem slightly faster. We warmed up on a small patch of floor in a corner pattern while a pro final thundered past us like a weather system. When we checked in, the organizer squeezed my shoulder briefly, 2 fingers, quick as a metronome click, and said, "We're on it." And they were. I saw him once across the lobby. He was with a different studio, a number pinned crooked on his back, showing a girl in a fringed dress something with his hands that made my stomach drop. He saw me see him and started to angle over, and security appeared so quietly I didn't clock them until they were between us. He looked past their shoulder at me and tried to form his face into sorry, or maybe I'm a new person now, but the only thing I felt was how my skin recognized the shape of my own shoulder under tape and didn't want to be near him again. That was it. He didn't get in my air for the rest of the day. That clean break was a gift in the smallest, most bureaucratic packaging. My solo was right after lunch. I picked music that sits just under my sternum and hums, a track I could count in my bones even half asleep. We walked out, the lights felt warmer than the air, and the first bar came up fine. On bar 4, the sound cut. Not a skip. A dead. I heard someone in the sound booth say wait, into a dead mic, and somewhere way off a fork hit the rim of a plate. My feet still had count. My partner looked at me and didn't ask anything, and we kept going. I've trained for years to not outrun the music. Suddenly there wasn't any to chase, just this clean silence and the thud of shoes and breath. The crowd started clapping on 2 and 4 and then clapped wrong because that's how clapping goes, and I wanted to laugh in the middle of a rond and didn't. A judge in the corner started tapping his pen on his knee exactly on the beat. We danced without lifting so much as an eyebrow outside of the syllabus, and when we hit our last line, the text got the track back and it swelled in all at once like a tide coming home. We took the bow on the music that should have started us. It was messy and perfect. Later the scorer told me the judges wrote held composure, good use of floor, music awareness extraordinary, and one of them underlined extraordinary 3 times like a kid. We placed first out of 8, but that's not what sat with me. What sat with me was that my body didn't make itself smaller to fit back into somebody else's panic. It kept its count. There was a small, ridiculous, lovely thing too. The college team had a gap in the afternoon and a girl with eyeliner wings sharp enough to cut a ribbon came to find me and asked if I could look at their newcomer cha-cha because 2 through 4s felt like a question mark. I counted for them in the hallway, tapped rhythms on the carpet with a heel, and by heat time they were grinning like thieves. They didn't sweep a final or anything cinematic. The best they did was make their coach, who always looks like a kindly hedgehog, clap his hands over his head exactly once. It was enough to feel like I'd come full circle with them storming a ballroom in rented suits and borrowed shoes. That night's collegiate team coordinator cornered me near the vending machines with a plastic cup of stale pretzels and asked if I'd be interested in guest coaching once a month. You don't have to say yes now, she added immediately, like she was afraid to spook a feral cat. I said yes then anyway. On the drive home, my practice bag open on the seat beside me like a patient I'd performed surgery on, my phone buzzed with an email from the beginner class sign-up form. Someone wrote you a note. I opened it at a stoplight. It was 3 sentences from a woman I didn't know. Hi. I think I'm dating your ex? He said you tried to ruin his dance career. Did he ever? Is there anything I should know? It was a single, honest, terrible sentence hiding in a polite paragraph. I pulled into a parking lot and typed back that I'd meet her in daylight, in public, and that I would be specific and keep it to facts. She came the next afternoon with her hair pulled back too tight like it could keep her head from tipping. I told her that he'd grabbed me, that he didn't like being corrected, that he'd been removed from a ballroom by security. I told her the studio he was at now. She listened like someone hold breaths underwater. She didn't cry. She said, "Thank you," and then said, "I thought I was crazy." It wasn't a triumph. It was heavy and necessary, and it added a weight to his side of the scale I hadn't wanted to carry alone. Back at the studio, the beginner class installed itself as a weekly ritual so quickly it felt like I'd always had this hour. A couple in their 50s started bringing a thermos of tea for me and leaving it unlabeled on the front desk like a secret handshake. The guy with steel toes bought dance shoes and forgot them every week and did fine in socks. One night a new student came in out of the rain, tall enough that we had to finesse our frame to not elbow the air vent, asking if he was in the right place to learn how to not destroy his sister's wedding first dance. He was careful with his hands the way you are when you used to do a clumsy thing and someone taught you not to drop it. When he messed up, he didn't look at me to ask me to pretend he hadn't. He looked at his own feet and laughed and fixed it. At the end he asked, "Do people compete in this?" In the tone of someone asking for directions because they might want to go there someday, not because they expect to be driven. I said yes, and for the first time answering that didn't feel like a defense. There were weird little ripples too. One night I came out of class and found a small bouquet on the hood of my car. Not roses, oddly, gerberas and something green. No card. My stomach went cold like metal. The studio owner checked the cameras and pulled a still of a delivery kid in a hoodie looking exactly like a delivery kid. He'd left the bouquet for the wrong car entirely. The receptionist recognized the florist tag and called them, and they apologized with the fluster of someone who has never been yelled at by a ballroom lady before. The flowers went home with the receptionist. I went home with my heartbeat where it belonged. If this all sounds neat, it isn't. My shoulder still spasms sometimes in a turn it never used to think about. I still check my rearview mirror more than I used to, but last Sunday I got the studio key for the first time, the little tape tag with my name on it scuffed from someone's pocket. I went in early, when the sun comes in low and the dust motes look like 1,000 tiny lights, and I set my phone face down on the speaker and ran my solo again. No music the first run, just breath and the click of my heels. The floor made that sound it only makes when you're the only one on it, like a friend clearing their throat before they tell you a secret. There is a comp in 3 weeks and a coaching session on my calendar and a beginner trying to make his wedding dance time the right kind of slow. There is space in my life again that's not about putting out a constant fire. Every time I step into hold with my partner, it feels like picking up a conversation we started years ago and never stopped, even when the room went quiet. I don't know where this is going. I know the count. I know my ribs can lift without bracing. I know that when the music cuts out, I can hear it anyway. Update 4. The first night I walked into the college gym with a roll of blue painter's tape and a bag of practice shoes, the whole place smelled like rubber and old popcorn. The ceiling fans clicked like slow metronomes. Their studio was half a basketball court and a boombox someone had balanced on 2 milk crates. They'd made a whiteboard schedule that was equal parts heat list and doodles of stick figures and tails. The kindly hedgehog coach waved me over like I might bolt. I made them line up in socks, because the floor was too slick for suede, and we taped little numbers to their backs with the painter's tape and the righteous zeal of people who have learned from static cling. We drilled change of weight until the squeak of rubber on markings became a rhythm of its own. They kept calling me coach? With a question mark at the end, like they were afraid I'd correct them on grammar and not on frame. When someone's ponytail holder snapped and a tidal wave of hair shot into her face mid-basic, the entire line stopped to hand her a scrunchie like it was a relay baton. I wrote breathe on 4 so many times that my dry erase marker died and left a ghost echo of the word on the board. I left with chalk dust on my knuckles and a plan in my head that felt suspiciously like choreography. At the studio, the owner slid a manila envelope across the front desk like it was contraband. "Do you want a sundae?" she said, and waited like that was the whole of the thing. Inside was a printed schedule, a stack of waivers, and a note in her tiny engineer handwriting. Also, pro leaving town. 2 of his students want to keep competing low bronze. Would you consider taking one? I could feel the word professional sitting in my mouth like a foreign coin. Not glamorous, a badge with teacher on it and too many early mornings. My stomach did the drop and settle thing it does before a final. I told her yes before I could talk myself into a long preamble about imposters and thresholds. She smiled like she'd been waiting for me to use my own legs. The comp 3 weeks out turned into a small circus in the way all hotel ballroom weekends do. The Marley had been laid a hair crooked. You could see a strip of carpet peeking on the back wall like a shy animal. In the practice room, someone's mother was sewing rhinestones in a circle of children while a grown man did hip isolations next to a ficus. We warmed up to the sound of a waltz that had been recorded 6 metronomes ago and was now a shade too fast. On our second pass in hold, my partner said, very calm, "I think my nose is bleeding." I turned and it was a neat, alarming line down the philtrum like a cartoon. There is a strange comfort in knowing what to do in a crisis that is not actually a crisis. I had a tampon in my bag because every woman who dances does. He held it like a baby bird. "It goes." "Where?" he said, and then laughed at himself, already pinching the bridge. We did a tiny, ridiculous surgery in the corner, and I taped the outside with beige medical tape I keep for blister decoys. He looked like he'd lost a fight with a roll of paper towels, but the bleeding stopped. "Do we scratch?" he asked. We dance, I said, and he nodded once in that way he has when he trusts me because I said it like a count. We went on. He kept his head line, I kept my eye line, and the only person who seemed put out was a judge who couldn't quite decide if the tape was a fashion statement. A freshman I'd led at the last comp barreled into me between heats with her hair in 2 French braids and a bag of clementines. Coach, she said without the question mark, like the word had finally decided to live in her mouth. 2 through 4 don't feel like questions anymore. She pressed a clementine into my hand like a medal, and I ate it sitting cross-legged on the carpet while the deck captain yelled numbers into the air like bingo. There was a hiccup at awards. The MC said our number for third, and I clapped for the way the bow feels even when it's not yours, and then the scrutineer jogged to the stage with a handful of printouts and whispered in the MC's ear, and suddenly we were second, and the couple I'd applauded slid left on the podium like human magnets repelling. None of it mattered as much as the way my partner squeezed my hand with his fingers instead of his thumb, exactly the opposite of how I used to get gripped. The weirdest thing was small and modern. On the way to the restroom, a girl in a satin robe with rollers still in her bangs pointed at me and said, "You're the no music girl." She didn't say it like a gotcha. She said it like a title. Later that night a practice shoe company DM'd me asking if they could send a pair if I wouldn't mind tagging them when I wore them. It's silly and a little commercial and it still made me grin like a kid in a candy aisle. I picked the ugliest, most sensible taupe because that's who I am when no one is watching. The woman who'd emailed me about him met me again in a coffee shop with jittery light and a barista who knew too many milk alternatives. She didn't order anything. She said, simply, "I moved out." Not a story. A sentence. She slid her keys onto the table next to her elbows, and they didn't rattle. "Thank you," she said, and for once it didn't feel like a burden you have to put down gently, just 2 words quietly placed between us. We left at the same time and walked in opposite directions, and that right angle felt like geometry I could finally live inside. The tall guy with the careful hands booked a private for his sister's wedding because I think my instincts are wrong and I'd like new ones. He showed up with the hem of his jeans dark from rain and a playlist he'd made with 3 songs that were all somehow the exact wrong tempo for a rumba and exactly right for someone's grandmother to cry to. He listened with his face and not just with his ears. When he stepped on me, he said my fault, as if that were information we might both need to keep safe. At the end he showed me a 10-second video from the wedding of 2 people from Ohio in a barn, clapping offbeat like a small regional sport. He looked proud anyway. "Do people go watch this? Like watch? He asked, and he pointed at the flyer for the comp pinned to the corkboard. "They do," I said. "You can. You don't have to ask anyone's permission." He nodded like the permission he'd been asking for most of his life had finally come from the person who owed it to him. I said yes to the Sunday slot and it turned into its own ecosystem within a month. The thermos couple started leaving me honey packets with unironic post-it notes that said "You are doing amazing, sweetie," in the art teacher's handwriting. Steel-toe boots showed up in actual dance shoes and left them on the roof of his car. We watched them ride around on the highway later, that week like 2 small leather birds. He came in apologizing to the shoes, as if that would help, and danced in socks with the comfort of someone who has made worse mistakes and still woke up the next day. Taking on a pro-am student was a different gear. He's in his 60s, a retired dentist who counts out loud in fractions. He wants to do bronze waltz and maybe, if he feels wild, a tango that will not frighten his cardiologist. The first time we went into hold and I realized I was, officially, the professional part of this equation, something settled and something lifted. "You'll tell me when I clamp?" he said, and I told him I would, and then he didn't. We signed him up for a 1 day in 3 months with his name under mine on a heat list I wanted to take a picture of and didn't. It wasn't all neat. During the team match at the collegiate session I'd choreographed, the sound ate itself for a bar and a half, and the team did exactly what we'd practiced, nothing heroic, just a breath and a count. They landed on the push 3 like they meant to do it that way all along. At a social a week later, a heel tip shot off my pump like a champagne cork mid-spin and went pinging across the floor like an offended insect. We collected it, glued it back on with E6000 in the office under a poster of Blackpool winners while a line of people took turns peeking in to offer useless advice and candy. I danced the rest of the night in practice sandals and was still alive in the morning. There was one more small bureaucratic gift. The organizer from the previous comp emailed me a template for a no trespass letter the studio could file if we needed it and a line about "We've added notes to your competitor profile in case of future flags." It read like a receipt and felt like a rope handhold on a steep path. My badge said "Teacher at the studio showcase last weekend," black block letters on white plastic. I clipped it on and it sat crooked because my dress strap is never agreeable. I caught my reflection in the door on the way onto the floor and didn't brace. The band played a hair slower than the track we'd drilled to because live music breathes, and my student breathed with it without me having to say anything at all. On the bow, the audience clapped on 1 and 3 because of course they did, and somewhere inside the strange math of all of this, my ribs kept the time like they had finally understood their job. There's another comp on the calendar and a dentist counting 1 and 2 under his breath and a college team that texted me a video of their new jackets like they'd gotten into their first choice school. I don't know what this is turning into except something I can shape with my own hands. When I unlock the studio on Sunday mornings now, the key sticks a little, and I shoulder the door open and the room inhales with me. The floor still makes that throat-clearing sound when it's empty. I know the weight of it. I know how it holds. I know that if the music falls out from under me again, I'm not the one who goes silent. Update 5. The week I decided to sign up for my first teaching certification exam, the studio printer ate the registration form and spit it back out like confetti. The syllabus books live in a milk crate in the office, pages that smell like plastic and coffee, and I walked around with one tucked under my arm for 3 days like it was a pet. The exam itself took place in a strip mall ballroom 2 towns over where the carpet had a pattern that made your eyes hum. 3 examiners sat at a folding table with clipboards and faces that had practiced not reacting. My demonstrator was a sweet 20-year-old who looked terrified until I told him, "You're here too, make me look like I know where my feet go," and he laughed out loud and then stood up straight. They asked me to dance bronze waltz through tango and then stand in stocking feet and talk them through CBM and where the center of pressure travels in a heel turn. One examiner tapped the end of his pen against his pad every time I said "actually," and around the 10th tap I felt my own voice get quieter and clearer like someone had turned just the hiss down on a radio. When we finished, the head examiner said, "Your mechanics are clean. Don't apologize before you teach," and he wrote "pass" in a neat square hand next to my name. It was not fireworks, but it was like being handed a key and realizing it fits. 2 days later the college gym had a bake sale in the corner while we drilled promenade. We had to peel the custard tarts off the foul line because someone had set the tray there to take a picture and everything slides eventually. The hedgehog coach announced they'd gotten a tiny grant from the student government, $48.16, he said, delighted, and then looked at me like he wanted to apologize for the number. I told him we could make $48 stretch like elastic if he let me make a list we wouldn't call a list. He did. We bought a roll of painter's tape thick enough to change a floor plan and a box of doorstops because the doors like to hit the backs of ankles when no one's watching, and then one of the seniors texted her uncle who owns a theater company, and 2 days later a U-Haul coughed out an old piece of Marley with a tear down one side and a smell like every show that had sweated on it. We unrolled it across half the cord and cut it with a bread knife because that's what someone found, and we taped the edges down and wrote "do not fold" in 4 places like we were protecting an ancient document. The first time their sneakers hit it, the room went quiet the way it does when everyone notices they're suddenly standing on something that wants to be moved on. The comp on my calendar turned into a relocation exercise. On Saturday night, during the pro show, someone's fog machine and a ballroom sprinkler head decided they were old enemies. It started with a single bead hanging off chrome like a storybook and then turned into rain that looked like it was falling up because the stage lights made everything backwards. The Marley went glassy in under 30 seconds and the scent of hard water hit everyone at once. The band lifted their instruments like they were rescuing cats. The organizer's voice over the PA stayed very calm. "There is a register of calm that sounds like it's been to this rodeo before," and said, "We are moving to Ballroom B." A line of soaked pros carried mirrors like we were performing some slow ritual. Volunteers rolled Marley like giant black tongue depressors, and I learned exactly how heavy a 10 by 40 piece of dance floor is when 6 people carry it elbow to ear. Someone lent me gaff tape and I taped seams in a line I was absurdly proud of. The deck captain's hair dripped onto his clipboard and he didn't seem to notice. They picked heats up 2 hours later like nothing had happened. My number was 1-something-ish in the night and the lights in Ballroom B buzzed like summer insects. When our scholarship ran, the floor felt good under my shoes, no hidden slicks, and the crowd was the loopy, punch-drunk kind of generous that only exists after midnight. The tall guy with the careful hands showed up to watch, which he said twice like he was testing the words for weight. He had his sister with him, the one with the barn wedding and the exact wrong rumbas on her playlist, and they stood near the back with coffee cups that steamed like they were part of the fog machines. Sorry. He didn't try to get my attention when we warmed up. He helped a volunteer move a row of conference chairs without anyone asking. When we came off the floor, he held a paper towel roll like it was a bouquet and said, "I wasn't sure what you needed," and somehow that sentence worked better than flowers. We won the scholarship we'd entered. It came with a check that looked like a prop, too big for any sensible wallet, and a crisp envelope with real money hiding in it. It's rude to count cash in a ballroom. I counted in the elevator. It was more than I expected, less than a miracle, exactly enough to feel like a dare. On Monday I handed the college treasurer a money order for a matching piece of Marley I'd found in a theater surplus group online, and she blinked like I'd run a waltz into the registrar's office. "Is this legal?" she asked. "It's tape and floor," I said, and she shrugged and stamped a receipt that made it concrete. My pro-am dentist had his first outing at a one-day comp where the ballroom was actually a bank lobby on weekends, and the columns meant nobody could take a full diagonal without pretending they meant to waltz around a marble tree. He counted 1 and 2 out loud into the crook of my neck during our first heat and then realized he'd said it loud enough for the judges to hear and mouthed, horrified, sorry like the word might unsay itself. He kept his frame. When his heel stuck for a breath on a piece of spalled grout, he didn't clamp. He looked at me like we were allowed to solve it together and then we did, which is more heroic than anything that looks like a hero. After, he bought a lemon bar the size of a wallet from the snack table and ate half with a fork and tucked the other half into a napkin with the care of someone who knows how easy it is to break a small thing. There was a panel in the afternoon about partnering practices, which is what happens when a ballroom tries to put a hand on a bruise without pressing. It wasn't advertised, it was a note on the heat list like a dentist appointment, optional and at 3:15. The organizer asked me if I'd sit at the front and I said yes before I could get weird about microphones. A studio owner I didn't know said the sentence, "Your student shouldn't have to be brave," and the room did that little animal stillness. The deck captain talked about how to tell him something without feeling like you're tattletaling. I told the story of the guy at the last comp in 3 sentences only, like I promised myself I would. Someone in the back asked what to do if the person you need to be safe from is your teacher. Nobody had a tidy answer. The panel ended not with applause but with the sound of pens on paper when people write someone's number down to pin to a bulletin board later. It was a small bureaucratic gift wrapped in unglamorous language, and it mattered in a way that will never look like a final. Something else strange and small happened at the charity gala the studio got roped into. It was on the rooftop of a museum with plexiglass railings and wind that took bobby pins personally. The donors wore the sort of shoes you take off in elevators. We were background texture while a jazz trio played Cole Porter at a tempo that made every basic feel a hair tipsy. Halfway through our demo, a spotlight bulb popped with a sound like a knuckle cracking and sprayed the floor with glittering not glitter. We stopped because I have a deep love of my eyes, and the trio slid without missing a beat into an acoustic something nobody could screw up, and 5 of us got on our knees with damp cocktail napkins and swept glass into a dustpan like we were in a kitchen. We went back on. The donors clapped in the wrong places with moneyed enthusiasm. After, a woman with a haircut that had its own zip code said, "You moved like the wind didn't get a vote," which I wrote down later in the notes app on my phone to pull out on a day when a heel pin fights me. He, you know which he, didn't make an appearance as a body. I got one email from an address that looked like a firmware update with a subject line that was only my first name, and the studio manager forwarded it straight to the folder with the other flag things like she was sliding it under a door we no longer open. The no trespass form lives in the office file cabinet between incident report and pandemic plan, and it reads like a recipe. It is nice to know that if I need ingredients, there are measurements now. The beginner class turned itself into a chorus of recurring jokes. The art teacher made us merit badges out of felt that say things live in 2 and I keep mine on my practice bag like armor. Steel Toes showed up with a new pair of shoes and a blister the size of a nickel, and I showed him how to tape a donut around it with the calm of someone who has taped weirder. The careful hands guy bought his sister new heels for her reception and brought them to the lesson in a paper bag like contraband because she'll cry if the box is too big a deal. He still asks, at the end of every session, "Do people compete in this?" Like there's a door he's just now noticing and he's deciding whether to knock. He came to the late comp and he stayed until the last heat at 1:42 a.m. and helped tear down tape, and when I said he didn't have to, he said, "You didn't either," which is not technically true and also not wrong. On Sunday I unlocked the studio and the key stuck like it always does and the room inhaled with me. I ran my solo with the music off first, then on, then off again because apparently that's our kink now. The floor made that friendly throat clearing sound and I answered it with my heel and then my toe and then my breath. The Marley we bought for the college team is a little uneven, and when they rolled it out last week they sent me a video where a freshman crawls across it with a hair dryer to warm a stubborn corner flat. It is not neat. It is beautiful. The heat list for next month lives on my fridge under a magnet shaped like a grapefruit. My ribs know where to go before I tell them. When the music falls out from under me, it is almost funny now how clear the count gets. I didn't know that was a muscle, I know it now.